The unique Chedisco Mountains meet the warm South Atlantic stream leading into Gambetta Bay and form a semi-tropical setting for beautiful Rio de Janeiro. This location was discovered by Portuguese explorers in 1505, making Rio one of the oldest cities in South America. But its fresh vitality for life and living has given Rio a well-deserved reputation for being an exotic playground, not only for its festive 5 million inhabitants, but also for the world's jet-set elite, who fill the sun-baked beaches of Copacabana and Ipanema by day and the samba bars all night. Everyone from October to March successfully escaping the Northern Hemisphere's cold gray winter in the process. This makes Rio de Janeiro a fitting location for the start of a sports season that shares many elements of the same reputation. The charisma of beautiful people living on the limit and life's fast lane is the rightful basis for Formula One Grand Prix motor racing's bizarre atmosphere. These are the 1,200-pound single-seater open-wheel vehicles that fly on the ground. Their 1,500cc purebred racing engines develop a staggering 660 horsepower, pushing man and machine well over 200 miles an hour. The Grand Prix of Brazil is the first of 16 events, moving from Rio to South Africa, then all across Europe and North America. At the end of this 8-month trek awaits the fame and million-dollar fortune of becoming the world champion of drivers or constructors. The popularity of Grand Prix racing in Brazil is illustrated by the fact that during the past 12 years, 4 World Driving Championships have been claimed by 2 Brazilian drivers, starting with Emerson Fittipaldi in 1972 and 74, then Nelson Piquet in 81 and 83. It is the ultimate dream of every young Brazilian to follow their example and become a national hero via this most dangerous and difficult international sport. This is a very warm John Bizignano in a very hot Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'll be your host, along with Simon Taylor, for this 90-minute ESPN coverage of the Brazilian Grand Prix for Formula One racing cars. Simon and I will be presenting technical reports, driver interviews, all the latest F1 updates, plus the fantastic Grand Prix race action. So please join us after this short message for the first Grand Prix of 1984 and a detailed look at the hot spots of Formula One. We'll be right back. With outside temperatures hitting 100 degrees plus, track and cockpit readings can easily soar over the 160 mark. This puts maximum stress on every F1 component that is already being pushed to its limit. Now, there are 3 areas that are most vulnerable: the engine, tires, and driver. These are the hot spots of Formula One. Normal operating temperatures for engine oil and water are around 175 degrees Fahrenheit. With weather conditions such as at Rio, these needles will nearly be off their gauges at 220 plus. This is actually well beyond water's boiling point, and therefore doesn't offer much cooling. Only the finest race-proven lubricants and coolants can survive this ultimate test. We asked Brian Hart, designer of the F1 Hart Turbo, about some of the strategies and designs used to combat these problems. Why cannot a cooling system be designed to deal with these temperatures here at Rio?
Well, the biggest problem is fundamentally fitting the size of such a system into a modern racing car under the regulations which we have to design the cars. It would be too big, too heavy, and undoubtedly too complicated.
So you actually could cool the engines, but you'd have several hundred gallons of water to do it in radiators that wouldn't fit into the car.
Yes, and you therefore have aerodynamic and weight problems.
So it's a trade-off. You have to give away some temperature for weight.
Yeah. The vital thing about current Formula One is the minimum weight limit. And being on the minimum weight limit really prohibits some potential, technical innovations you could use.
Brian, it's obvious that many of the teams here are actually cooling the fuel to almost freezing temperatures before going into the cars. What's the strategy behind this?
Well, basically, you can change the specific gravity and therefore actually physically put into a certain capacity tank more fuel, which is an advantage. There is an extra possible advantage in here that you can run the engine slightly leaner, and this is good because of the fuel limitation, and it does possibly help the engine run a little cooler, modern turbocharged engine. But the main fundamental reason here is to put more fuel in than actually physically you would do at normal ambient.
Your engine is being used in several Formula One cars here. I bet you breathe a little easier when the outside temperatures are less relative to your cars being able to finish.
Oh yes, yeah. Here it taxes the systems a little bit.
The correct operating temperature for tires is a fine line. Maximum grip is produced between 200 and 220 degrees Fahrenheit. If the heat is allowed to build up only 30 degrees to 250, the rubber compound becomes too soft for efficient braking and cornering. Tire race manager Lee Gogg explains the problem.
Well, there's a certain range of heat that the tire operates best with. In other words, we must get it warm enough above normal daily temperature up to around 200, 220 degrees. At the same token, if you get it too hot, then it'll get slippery and will lose its grip, will not do any cornering or any braking. So the problem is find a compound that'll operate in the area that we want.
Now, drivers can cool off their tires by their driving style during a race. Their tires get hot and they do a few laps less damaging to them and they'll actually cool down. Is that correct?
Yes, they'll definitely cool down. When you're up at 230, 40 degrees temperature and you take a slower lap, you may drop from 20, 30 degrees very quickly. Now, certain compounds will come back up and you can reheat them and they'll be just as good. Other compounds won't. So that becomes another factor to worry about.
I bet your job is made a little easier at the cooler tracks, such as Belgium or England, not these 110-degree temperatures with 160-degree track temperatures.
Well, on the surface, that sounds like it might be right, but that's not necessarily true, because when we go on a cooler, different track, we may use hotter running compounds, and we'll select something that, in Formula One, it's highly competitive, and we're basically at the limit all the time.
So the tire hot spot for you travels from track to track?
Most certainly. It's different every track, but you're going to have to be at the limit if you expect to win.
Anyone who has experienced a good sauna bath knows the effect of 100-degree plus temperatures on the human body. But in a sauna, you're sparsely clothed and not exerting much energy. A Formula One driver is dealing with the same temperatures, but wearing 6 layers of fireproof material while his body is being subjected to constant battering and pulling over 2 G-forces for almost 2 hours. He must maintain his physical and mental ability to the maximum efficiency, testing proof of true athletic fitness. Nigel Mansell of John Player Team Lotus describes the situation well. What's it like driving at 160 degrees in the cockpit?
Well, it isn't cool, that's for certain. It's rather warm, in fact. The only problem you can get is if you get sweat in your eye, it starts stinging a lot.
It must be terrible for your concentration, though, to maintain both a physical and mental fitness under those conditions.
Oh, it's certainly hard, but the thing is you do training over the winter and you come down here in January like we did in test, and it was very, very hot there. I think I saw 170 degrees in my car the one time, and you just got to get used to it.
Yeah, but Nigel, you live on an island off the English coast. where 70 degrees is a record breaker. How can you train for something like this down here, 170 in the cockpit?
Well, you can't, but what you have to do, you have to come a little earlier to acclimatize yourself to the conditions, and that's what we all do. But it's a problem, but it's not too bad.
What about towards the end of the race? Do you actually feel yourself being worn down by the G-forces and the heat and the battering?
There's no doubt about it. Towards the end of the race, you start feeling completely drained. Your neck muscles and your arms, everything starts aching, but you still pull through, especially if you're in a good position. You don't feel any of the problems. You only feel the problems when you stop.
Last year, Riccardo Patrese actually passed out in the race. Do you feel that you've ever been in a situation like that?
No, I don't think so, but it can happen to any one of us, really. It's just a question whether we can breathe properly in the cars, and I think Riccardo had a problem breathing in the car because it wasn't ventilated properly, and I just hope none of us have the same problem.
Would you come in if you felt yourself getting terribly weak, or would you just keep going until the same thing happened, pass out?
Well, you never know, do you, until that happens. So, but for sure, if you're a professional driver, you keep going until your car stops.
Do you change your driving style? Do you rest at any time and try and build up your strength again?
No, you try and breathe properly going down the straight, because going down the straight is the easiest place to relax. But this track is very demanding, so you've only perhaps got 5 seconds, 7 seconds a lap at the most to have a rest, that's all.
So you have to maintain your cool in the hottest conditions possible.
Something like that.
Now, the next time you're stuck in traffic at 100 degrees, try and imagine what it's like for a Formula One driver with his cockpit temperatures up to 160, and again, in full race attire. So put yourself in a position of sitting there in that traffic, but maybe in full ski dress with parka, turtleneck, warm-up pants for deep powder skiing, boots, and then add a helmet. That's the situation that each Formula One driver here at Rio has to face for over a 2-hour period. Now, in those 2 hours, he will lose between 6 and 7 pounds of body weight. Simon Taylor will be back right after this short message with the qualifying story of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Be with us.
And this is where the new 1984 Grand Prix season really gets underway, with the crucial final qualifying session here in the heat of a Rio de Janeiro Saturday afternoon, the qualifying session which will decide the starting grid positions for tomorrow's race. A lot of new drivers in new cockpits, new cars, new engines, and new regulations this year, because the refueling stops mid-race, which added so much excitement to last season, are no longer allowed. The cars will be making pit stops during the race for fresh tyres, almost certainly, but they've got to run the whole race on the 220 litres of fuel that they're allowed to carry. And that means that fuel consumption is going to be crucial, because these turbocharged engines, if their turbo is turned up too much, if the turbo boost is wound on, can be very, very thirsty indeed. There's been a lot of testing, of course, during the off-season. Most of these cars have been tested both here in Rio and in the south of France and in South Africa. So already a lot of testing miles under the belts of most of these drivers with their new cars. And here comes the man who we hear now from the timekeepers has taken pole position. 1 minute, 28.39 seconds for the lap, an average speed on this twisting circuit of 127 miles an hour. The aristocratic young Italian Elio De Angelis with the John Player Lotus.
We're with the pole-setting driver Elio De Angelis with Team Lotus. Elio, this is your second pole position ever in your career.
Yeah.
Is it harder to start from pole and have to lead the group?
I think will be much more easy than start from the back of the grid. No, I think will be quite easy because our car is very well balanced, and with race tires we are in good shape. So.
What about the heat here at Rio? It's one of the hottest tracks you'll attend all year.
Actually, it's quite hot, but not as hot as was in January, so will be feasible, will be good.
Elio, you're one of the few drivers in Formula One that has stayed with the same team throughout the years. This is your 5th year with Lotus. You must be pleased that things are coming about right for you now.
Seems to be that is the right choice. Yeah.
At times you must have wanted to change teams or seriously considered it, though.
Yes, but I thought that I must give something to my boys, to my team, and I guess that sometimes it's not the same things to winning for somebody else. When you feel, now I feel a victory for Lotus should be a good one, and it's the same thing that I have for myself.
Tomorrow is their 300th Grand Prix start. Wouldn't you like to win that for them?
Yes, sure.
Any race strategy for tomorrow?
No.
Stay out in front and from flag to flag.
That's right, try to be there at the end.
Michele Alboreto, the new boy in the Ferrari team, and René Arnoux, who was with them last year. Quite a lot of healthy rivalry between these two Ferrari drivers, but it was the young Italian, the newcomer, who was quickest in practice, and so Alboreto, half a second slower than De Angelis, puts his Ferrari on the front row alongside the Lotus, and it'll be Alboreto who'll be carrying so much of the Italian hopes for tomorrow's race. No doubt they'll all be looking at their television screens thousands of miles away in Italy tomorrow. Third quickest in practice, another newcomer to a great team, it's Derek Warwick, who's joined the Renault team just this year after plugging away for so long with the less than competitive Toleman team. Now Warwick is joint #1 with Patrick Tambay in the Renault team, and he's shown what he can do with really competitive equipment by being third quickest in practice and looking already very confident indeed in the French car, looking already like a race winner.
Derek, you've qualified third in the first Grand Prix of 1984. How do you feel your performance went today?
Fairly mediocre, really, because we should have done, I think, a 28.5. I done a 29 because it's very difficult to get a clear lap here today, and every time I went out there I got tripped over by someone, and when I got the last lap in with the qualifiers, I screwed up, so I blame nobody but myself. We've done a 29.0 and we should have done a 28.5, which would have put us second on the grid. So
how do you feel about the greatest competition coming from a Lotus car powered by Renault engines?
Well, I think that's a compliment to Renault engines, because it goes to show that they get the same equipment as us, and it's all down to tyres, driver and chassis. You know, Renault are always very fair when it comes to that. They just pick 10 engines, we take them to a race meeting, and Lotus will have 2 and 4, we'll have 6 and 7, and Ligier will have 8 and 10 or whatever. You know, there's no favoritism at all.
You're one of the drivers who made a major team change this year. After several years with the Toleman team, is it a great difference going off to another team, new mechanics, new management, with the Renault team?
Yes, it is a big difference. I'd say the big difference really is the language, although it's not such a problem because Renault have sort of put me in the centre of an English-speaking Renault team, so it's not so bad for me.
And the competition with Patrick Tambay?
Well, you always get competition between two drivers, and it's going to be no different between me and Patrick as anybody else. The difference is Patrick's a gentleman. You know, we confer a lot, we decide what we're going to do, and there's no backbiting amongst us, and I think that's good between teammates.
Starting third on the grid tomorrow, what is your race strategy?
Well, I mean, to try and keep as cool as possible, because obviously the temperature affects your performance quite a lot. I think Michelin have a better race tyre than Goodyear. Both the cars in front of me are Goodyear shod, so I think that we're looking fairly good for the race. We've done a lot of full tank setups during practice, and I'm fairly confident for the race.
Fourth quickest in practice, just 0.3 of a second slower than Derek Warwick, the man who was driving for Renault last year, who so nearly won the World Championship for them, and who then left the team after a row immediately after the final Grand Prix last year. Some say he was fired, some say he walked out, but Alain Prost, the Frenchman who was with Renault for so long, is now with McLaren, using a TAG turbo-built Porsche-designed engine in the back of the McLaren and wanting to turn the tables on Renault very badly in tomorrow's race. Fifth quickest, Nigel Mansell. He was fastest of all in practice yesterday on Friday, but he's had a spin today which spoiled his best time. He's had to be satisfied with his Friday time. Alongside him, sixth quickest, Niki Lauda, one of the great Grand Prix names of all time. Niki Lauda, who never seems to be ruffled by anything that happens in Grand Prix racing, who brings his cool, calm, cold, calculating air to Grand Prix racing. And here's the Brazilian hero, Nelson Piquet, the reigning world champion, but not happy here in practice to be back on the fourth row. Not the best place to start your home Grand Prix from.
Nelson, you're looking at the qualifying sheet for this year's Brazilian Grand Prix. You also don't look too happy about it.
Well, it's not true. I'm seventh position, but we had a couple of problems today. We should have been much better.
What were the problems?
We have one qualifying engine that blew up in the first lap, and we could not do the time, and it used the normal engine that today is how you know that you have to do a good qualifying engine.
Nelson, here in Brazil, you're the current world champion and a Brazilian. Does that add extra pressure over beyond a normal Grand Prix for you?
No, that's normal. I'm champion from last year. Now this is completely different.
But the press are all over you. They're in your hotel, they're at the track.
Wow, that's normal. If I'm champion, no, if that's in Brazil, no, it's normal.
What is your race strategy tomorrow, starting from that grid position?
Well, try to finish the race, because I think it is very hard for the car, very hard for the drivers. I think the most important thing is to finish the race. If we finish the race, for sure you finish well.
Are you planning a pit stop for tires?
Well, even if I do, I cannot tell you. It's some secret we have. Maybe we left, we don't stop, we see.
Last year you won here. Do you think you can win from this grid position?
Well, I win the last 2 years, but in 1981 I win from sevens also, but every year is different. I don't think tomorrow will be very easy.
But it is possible. You've proven that.
Well, everything is possible.
Patrick Tambay, the ever personable, ever courteous, ever polite Frenchman with Ferrari last year, now with Renault. And he's put his car on row 4, eighth quickest. Remember, his teammate Derek Warwick, third quickest. So he's very anxious to show that he's worth his joint #1 position with the young Englishman. Very experienced driver, very canny, very thinking driver, and always a man to bring his car to the finish. Keke Rosberg now, former world champion. He was world champion before Nelson Piquet, and he's now tasting turbocharged power with the Honda engine in the back of the Williams. Most of last year he spent using the less than competitive non-turbocharged Cosworth engine. There he is talking to Patrick Head, the Williams designer, and the Frank Williams team, always very, very competitive. The cheerful little Frenchman René Arnoux here. Rather a varied season last year, very quick when it was going well, not so quick when it wasn't. So a driver who can surprise by going extremely quickly, a driver who can turn in a lackluster performance. Perhaps it'll be his day tomorrow. And Riccardo Patrese, another Italian. He won the final Grand Prix of last year when he was #2 for Brabham. He's now moved to the all-Italian Alfa Romeo team. And he is back on the 6th row. 11th fastest, 12th fastest alongside him, his own teammate, the American Eddie Cheever, also a newcomer to the Alfa Romeo team because he was with Renault last year. And a man who can turn in a very, very hard charging performance, a lot of good places under his belt, but he's never won a Grand Prix yet. Stay with us for ESPN's coverage of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Sunday afternoon here in Rio de Janeiro. It's hotter than ever, and ahead of 26 drivers lie 61 laps of this twisting, tortuous circuit. The opening round of the 1984 World Championship Grand Prix is going to be a very tough race indeed, and there's an enormous crowd of Brazilians here to see the fun. Obviously, the man they're cheering on, their own hero, the reigning world champion, Nelson Piquet. There's the Brazilian flag, which is going to wave madly if he can repeat his last 2 wins here. But on pole position, Elio De Angelis, alongside him, Michele Alboreto, Derek Warwick, Alain Prost, Nigel Mansell, Niki Lauda, all determined to keep Nelson Piquet away from that 3 wins in a row. There at the front of the picture, number 27, that's the red Ferrari of Michele Alboreto. Number 11, the Black Lotus, moving away off the grid. This is the final warm-up lap. You'll see the cars weaving to get some heat into their tyres. That sounds strange on a day as hot as this, but it's very important that these slick tyres are sticky and giving the maximum grip right from the green light. So De Angelis in the Black Lotus, Alboreto in the red Ferrari, leading the 26 cars on this final warm-up lap. There's Derek Warwick in the yellow Renault number 16, the third of those cars. Behind him, Alain Prost with the red and white McLaren, Nigel Mansell in the Lotus, Niki Lauda in his McLaren, and there you see Warwick starting to weave to get some warmth into the tyres, and the crowd absolutely agog. They're throwing bits of paper, they're cheering, they're waving. They've been sitting in those bleachers for a long time, building up the atmosphere, and now in a few moments, the excitement that they've waited all year for, the Brazilian Grand Prix, will be underway. De Angelis, with only the 2nd pole position of his career, very anxious indeed to turn in a good performance for John Player Lotus, using, of course, the turbo Renault engine. So 6 in fact, Renault turbo engines in this race, because the Renaults use them, the Lotuses use them, and so do the French Ligiers for the first time this season. All the 26 cars coming up to take their allocated places indicated by the yellow signboards. The starting procedure will be a red light, and following the red light will be a green. The green starts the race. Actually, only 25 cars on the grid, because the Italian Andrea De Cesaris will start from the pit lane after problems with his gear linkage with the Ligier. There are the lights now. Wait for the... Couldn't start his car. He needed a push start to get away, and so world champion Nelson Piquet in Brabham number 1 starts absolutely at the back of the field. But it's Michele Alboreto in the Ferrari in front. It's Derek Warwick in the Renault in 2nd place. Then the 2 Lotuses of Nigel Mansell and pole position man Elio De Angelis, who's back in 5th place, having started from pole. So not such a good start for the Italian. Niki Lauda is coming through also, but it's the Ferrari at the front. Storming round now on this first of 61 laps. Alboreto, Warwick, Mansell, De Angelis 4th, Lauda is 5th. Alain Prost was down there in the traffic somewhere. He's made a fairly slow start as well. So the 2nd row man, Alain Prost, well done. But there is Piquet, Nelson Piquet, coming charging through at the back of the field. He's got a long, long way to make up on this man, the leader, Michele Alboreto, Ferrari number 27. Alboreto then leads through the right-hander down by the water. In his mirrors, Derek Warwick coming up to complete the first of 61 laps. It's Alboreto, but he can't relax because Warwick is there with him. Mansell a little bit further back in 3rd place, and I think already Niki Lauda is looking for 4th place. Niki Lauda looking to demote Elio De Angelis to 5th. Alboreto on his way on this 2nd lap. The new Ferrari, designed by the Englishman Harvey Postlethwaite, a very small, neat car, smaller indeed and lighter than last year's car, and from the way it's looking, it's going to be a quick one for Ferrari this year. Alboreto, his first drive for Ferrari, and he's in the lead. Derek Warwick, his first drive for Renault, and he's in 2nd place. Nigel Mansell is still there in 3rd. Ferrari engine leads, Renault engine in 2nd place, Renault engine is 3rd, and in the background you see already up into 4th place is Niki Lauda, and Niki Lauda is challenging for 3rd. Niki Lauda up alongside Nigel Mansell now. As they come down the straight, Niki Lauda alongside and past. Niki Lauda is 3rd. Nigel Mansell pushed down to 4th place. And we see it again, and not a lot of room between these two cars, but nobody was going to keep Nicky Lauda from the third place that he wanted. Lauda then third and already pulling away from the two Lotuses. Fourth then, Nigel Mansell. Still fifth, Elio De Angelis. Patrick Tambay in the second Renault is sixth, and René Arnoux in the second Ferrari is seventh. Tambay also charging now up to De Angelis. I think Tambay is going to have a look at De Angelis. The Lotuses, so quick in practice already, seem to be faltering. There is Tambay attacking Lotus number 11, the yellow Renault, all over the back of the black Lotus. Renault powered both of them. But now De Angelis recovers and closes back up on his own teammate, Nigel Mansell. Already this race being run at an enormously hard pace. Very, very hot here. And don't forget that fuel consumption could well play a vital role in this race. No fuel stops allowed. They've got to make their 220 litres last. If they turn up the cockpit boost control of their turbochargers too greedily, they could find themselves running out of petrol towards the end of the race. Third man Lauda. Fourth man Mansell, fifth man De Angelis, sixth man Tambay, and Tambay trying on the outside of De Angelis, but De Angelis is on the left of the road, keeps the door shut. That's Mansell, his teammate, who's fourth, and still hanging on to this fifth place is De Angelis. There is Lauda, there is Mansell, there is De Angelis, there is Tambay and Arnoux, and that's Alain Prost attacking the Williams and passing the Williams of Keke Rosberg. So both of the McLarens seem to be running very, very strongly at the moment. We see it again. The yellow car is the Williams. The red and white car is the McLaren. Alain Prost passing Keke Rosberg. And we'll be right back after this short break with more ESPN Grand Prix race action. And you rejoin us on lap 4 of the Brazilian Grand Prix with Patrick Tambay now attacking Elio De Angelis for 5th place and taking it. So the Lotuses are split by the Renault number 15 of Patrick Tambay. And as they go through that long, long left-hander, we turn now to the man who's charging as hard as anybody, Nelson Piquet. He started at the back. He's working his way up through the field already. He's got a very, very long way to go. Still Michele Alboreto leading in the Ferrari, still Derek Warwick second in the Renault, still Nicky Lauda third in the McLaren, and Nigel Mansell, this man in the picture now, is still fourth with Lotus number 12. There is Nicky Lauda and there's Mansell, so the gap between third and fourth not very much. The gap between fourth and fifth very, very close indeed, because Tambay is now up to Nigel Mansell, and having passed De Angelis is now pushing Mansell very, very hard. Patrick Tambay charging along, closing on the Englishman. Then there's the René Arnoux Ferrari, which has moved up. So René Arnoux Ferrari has also passed De Angelis. These two Lotuses, which shone so much in practice, Mansell quickest on Friday, De Angelis quickest of all, earning the pole on Saturday. But in the race now, they're slipping back and slipping back. René Arnoux now ahead of De Angelis, and De Angelis is under pressure from the second McLaren. That is Alain Prost after his tardy start coming through. De Angelis slipping back all the time, and Prost challenges De Angelis now. De Angelis moves across to the right of the road, but he just lets Prost go by. Prost glances across a little way and tucks back onto his own side of the road to follow René Arnoux in Ferrari number 28 on his way up the field. So now Tambay still fifth, Arnoux is now sixth, Prost is now seventh, De Angelis demoted down to 8th place, Keke Rosberg is 9th in the Honda-powered Williams, and the race being run at a tremendous pace in the Brazilian heat. Battles all the way down the field. There was a glimpse of Piquet. That indeed is Nelson Piquet, already up on our lap charts in about 15th place. So he started 26th and dead last. This is the race he's won for the last 2 years running. It's his home Grand Prix. He's the reigning world champion. And we see the positions at the end of lap 5, 4.2 seconds, the gap between Alboreto, the leader, and Derek Warwick in second place. Nicky Lauda a further 7 seconds almost behind, and Nigel Mansell not very far behind Lauda. So the battle's still well and truly joined, And now we see Prost close to Arnoux. That's the battle for 6th place, and you get a championship point for 6th place, so it's a very important position. Arnoux really being pushed. Remember, it's his teammate, the newcomer, who's in front in the lead, but that's Prost going past Arnoux with no trouble at all, slotting the tag Turbo McLaren. Ooh, I say no trouble at all, but he was right up the curb that time. And you don't want to bang one of these very delicate, very, very sensitively balanced Formula One cars across a curb too often, because that can really upset the razor-sharp handling of the car. And we've got a pit stop already. It's Ayrton Silva de Senna, the young Brazilian. There he is coming into the pits with the tollman. He's waving his hands at the mechanics. He's saying it's all over. His first Grand Prix is all over. He was in Formula 3 last year, up to Formula 1, but already out of the race. They're the two Alphas going through. Number 4 is Stefan Beloff. Behind Beloff is Jacques Lafitte, and the back of that queue already is Nelson Piquet, so he's already up in what's that, about 14th place now, I think, on the lap chart. So from 26th to 14 in less than a dozen laps, that shows the pace that Nelson, in fact, he's already passing somebody. That is Nelson Piquet making up a place. He's passed Jacques Lafitte. And now we've got a battle for 2nd place. Niki Lauda up alongside Derek Warwick. They touch, but Lauda it is who forces the McLaren past the Renault. Derek Warwick pushed down, literally, by Niki Lauda, the ex-world champion from Austria, and already Derek Warwick has dropped back. That was quite a clout that the Renault took on its front left-hand wheel, but Niki Lauda has elbowed decisively past Derek Warwick, and McLaren number 8 is up into 2nd place. Michele Alboreto still the leader with the Ferrari. Niki Lauda, number 8, the McLaren, still, we're going to see it again, and definitely the back right-hand wheel of the McLaren touching the front left-hand wheel of the Renault, but that is the man who's still in the lead. Michele Alboreto looking very smooth out in front with Ferrari number 27. Michele Alboreto, the young Italian, leads for Ferrari. The veteran Austrian Niki Lauda in 2nd place for McLaren, and the British driver Derek Warwick 3rd now for Renault. Nigel Mansell still 4th. Patrick Tambay still 5th. Now, is Niki Lauda going to be able to close the gap up to Michele Alboreto? Through the shimmering heat, down the long straight goes the Ferrari. Do we see? There we do. There's the McLaren behind, there's the Renault behind. So the first 3 cars still very, very close indeed. And Alboreto will be able to see in his mirrors a glimpse of the new second man, Niki Lauda, even before his pit signals tell him, as they will indeed, that it's 5.9 seconds back to second man Niki Lauda, and Alboreto's got to keep the pressure on. Already Warwick more than a second behind Lauda in 3rd place. Alain Prost starting to show well. In fact, Alain Prost starting to close on Patrick Tambay. There they are. That's Mansell, number 12, and there is the battle for 5th place, because Patrick Tambay under real pressure. Once again, a Renault being attacked by a McLaren. So Patrick Tambay under the same sort of pressure from Alain Prost as his teammate Derek Warwick was from Niki Lauda. Prost tucked in behind in the slipstream of the Renault. Tambay weaves a little to try and throw him off, and indeed does throw him off a bit down the long straight. Can Prost now close up again on the corners? He does, and remember, there's a lot of needle between these two, because Prost was with Renault last year, and that's Stefan Beloff in the pits, the young German having his first Grand Prix with the Tyrrell team. The mechanics around the car, but it looks as though his race has been badly delayed. Now stay tuned for more ESPN Auto Racing 84. We'll be right back. Lap 12 of the Brazilian Grand Prix, 49 laps still to go, and still in the lead, Michele Alboreto of Italy with the Ferrari, the new second man, Niki Lauda, with the McLaren, and Lauda starting to put the pressure on Alboreto now. So a very, very open race indeed. Oh, and that is Alboreto! That is Alboreto off the track, and that's Niki Lauda going through, that's Derek Warwick going through. A spin for Michele Alboreto with the Ferrari, and that's dropped him to 3rd place. So Niki Lauda now goes into the lead. That's a glimpse of René Arnoux in the other Ferrari. He's still going, but oh, and that's Alboreto off again. Alboreto spinning twice. Now clearly there's something badly amiss with the handling of that Ferrari. Oh yes, he's slowed right down. Michele Alboreto, who led this race from the start, after only 12 laps, he's going slowly. I think he's making for his pits. And there we see Alain Prost moving up another place past Patrick Tambay. Alain Prost finally, who's been working away at Patrick Tambay, has finally sneaked by. So in just one short lap, as we see Prost moving past Tambay again, a very straightforward maneuver down that long straight. He's been sitting patiently in the slipstream, and now he's used every ounce of horsepower in the TAG turbo engine in the McLaren to move ahead. But with Michele Alboreto, 2 spins, and he's now out of the race. We now look down the order because it's changed quite a lot. We've now got Niki Lauda in the lead with the McLaren. In second place, Derek Warwick with the Renault. In third place, Nigel Mansell. The new 4th man is Alain Prost. Patrick Tambay demoted to 5th place, and René Arnoux is 6th. And there is the Ferrari in the pits. They're changing the tyres, but I think that's a routine thing to do. There's something going on the front right-hand brake by the look of things. Yes, it is the brake. They're pouring water on the brake at the front, and I would guess that that brake has jammed on. The man in the blue shirt is Mauro Forgieri, the technical chief of Ferrari, and they're trying to cool that front brake. Alboreto's sitting disconsolately in the car. There's nothing he can do, but they put the wheel back on, and I think they're going to try and put their car back in the race. The water has turned to steam. It's obviously terribly hot at the front of that car, but Alboreto rejoins. He's back in the race with the Ferrari, having lost the lead with what we think must have been front brake trouble. Now we look at Eddie Cheever with Nelson Piquet on his tail. Nelson Piquet's rapid progress up the field has got him up to Eddie Cheever's Alfa Romeo. Eddie Cheever driving a strong race, his first drive with the turbocharged Alfa, but Nelson Piquet's pace is greater, and Piquet is now tucked in behind Cheever and looking for a chance to dart by. Cheever, a very, very experienced hand indeed, not at all ruffled by the world champion's presence in his mirrors, but Piquet, I think, won't be denied because he's come right up through the field. He's got Jacques Lafitte's Williams behind him. Through the long Espns here at the Rio circuit, a very, very demanding track indeed, and the heat absolutely relentless. And remember that a lot of these cars are going to make pit stops. You saw a glimpse of 2 Ferraris there because Michele Alboreto has come out just behind his teammate René Arnoux after they've worked on the front of that car, and Nelson Piquet is past Cheever. No trouble at all. He just darts alongside, going down the long straight, and pulls away. And there is Alboreto back in the pits. Whatever the trouble was, they obviously haven't cured it. They've gone straight back to the front of the car. They've taken that front wheel off. They're putting another front wheel on. Perhaps the wheel that they put on was snagging something. And there is another McLaren moving up. That is Alain Prost going ahead now of Nigel Mansell. So Alain Prost makes up another place. Prost now goes into 3rd place. Nigel Mansell is demoted to 4th. Once again, the overtaking taking place down this long straight where the cars are getting up to about 175 miles an hour, and that's a pit stop for Jacques Lafitte. Jacques Lafitte with the second of the 2 Honda-powered Williams cars, as we look back now at Niki Lauda, the leader. Niki Lauda on his way in the lead, and that's Jacques Lafitte again. Lafitte has come out of the pits. Whatever his problem was, he's parking the Williams Honda. Nelson Piquet makes up another place, and that's an easy one for him to make up. It's his own teammate, Teo Fabi, who certainly didn't get in the world champion's way, but just let him through. And so Piquet's progress up the lap chart has got him now into 9th place, an incredible 9th place from 26th starting position, because you'll remember he got left stranded on the grid. Niki Lauda still the leader. Derek Warwick still in second place, Alain Prost, the new third man, Nigel Mansell is fourth. So it's McLaren, Renault, McLaren, Lotus Renault, then the Renault of Patrick Tambay in fifth place, René Arnoux Ferrari is sixth, the Lotus of Elio De Angelis, the man you'll remember who started from pole position, has slid back to seventh place. The sole surviving Williams Honda of Keke Rosberg is eighth, and Nelson Piquet, charging hard, is ninth. Eddie Cheever, the American in the Alfa, is 10th. There you see the positions at the end of 18 laps, and 4.2 seconds is the gap from Lauda to Warwick. It's not very much, and another 5.6 seconds down comes Alain Prost with the McLaren. Prost is catching Warwick. Warwick is not losing Lauda, and Mansell is only 13 seconds behind the leader. So a very, very open race indeed, and as I was about to tell you earlier, don't forget that there are pit stops still to come for most of these runners, because most of the cars are going to have fresh rubber halfway through the race. That's Johnny Cecotto, the Venezuelan former motorcycle world champion, into the pits with the Tolman. We've already seen Ayrton Senna retiring, and Eddie Cheever makes up a place. Eddie Cheever passes Teo Fabi. Turbo Alpha passes Turbo BMW Brabham, and Eddie Cheever moves up a place to follow racing this year as well as Grand Prix racing. And he's having his first run in the Brabham, where he's replaced Riccardo Patrese as the number 2. So, Nelson Piquet charging hard. Nelson Piquet carrying number 1 on the Brabham, which of course denotes that he is the world champion. And not a very good start so far for the Brabham BMW team, but the car always so immaculately turned out, designed by Gordon Murray, the South African, and always the Brabham one of the prettiest and most intelligently designed of the Grand Prix cars. The positions at the end of lap 20, 6.1 is now the gap from Lauda to Warwick, but it's 4.1 from Warwick back to Prost. So Prost keeping the pressure on, Prost relentlessly catching Derek Warwick, the McLaren catching the Renault for second place. Nigel Mansell is still fourth with the Lotus Renault. Patrick Tambay still fifth with his Renault. René Arnoux still sixth with the Ferrari. ESPN race action will continue after this short break. Stay with us. 21 laps completed in the Brazilian Grand Prix, 40 laps still to go, and this man, Niki Lauda in McLaren number 8, still setting a scorching pace. In third place, his teammate Alain Prost, starting to close the gap relentlessly to the second man, Derek Warwick. And in the pits now, Brabham number 2, Teo Fabi. I think this must be the first of the routine tyre stops, and the Brabham mechanics really know how to make a quick tyre stop. That was about 12 seconds by my stopwatch, and away on its fresh tyres goes Brabham number 2, a little puff of flame from the exhaust pipe, so typical of these turbocharged cars. And we look now at Derek Warwick, number 16, in second place, and let's see how close Alain Prost has got McLaren number 7 to him. There it is, the two of them very, very close indeed now, and Derek Warwick will know from his mirrors that Prost is creeping closer, behind them one of the Arrows cars, which they've both lapped. And while Niki Lauda is comfortably out in front, it's Derek Warwick now who's got to start to drive defensively. See how that McLaren is creeping closer all the time, diving closer under braking. And remember that it was Warwick who got clouted by Niki Lauda on lap 10 when the McLaren forced its way past Warwick. And now Warwick's got another McLaren to contend with, and look how close Prost got under braking for this sharp right-hander. Now, under acceleration, over the start-finish line, can the Renault engine throw off the tag turbo engine in the McLaren? The McLaren creeping alongside, but Prost can't get close enough. He has to tuck in behind once more. Both of the cars drifting through that right-hander and accelerating away. The Renault pulls away a little bit. Under braking, the McLaren closes a bit. A superb battle between two very, very fine Grand Prix drivers. And once again, remember that Prost is no lover of the Renault team anymore. He left them at the end of last season after quite an argument, and he's going to be very keen to show the Renault team that he's quicker than they are today. Derek Warwick on his first drive for the Renault team after having spent so long with the less than competitive Toleman team, and Warwick, the first chance in his career to show what he's really made of, but I think Prost is going to attack. Prost tucked into the slipstream. He pulls out. It's the classic move. This is where Lauda did it, and this time, no collision. Prost goes smoothly on his way, and there's absolutely nothing that Derek Warwick can do about it, and we see it again, out of the slipstream, up alongside, on the brakes as late as you can, take a tight line for the left-hander at the end of the long straight, and Warwick now has to eat the exhaust of the McLaren. So we've now got McLaren first, McLaren second, Renault third, Lotus Renault fourth. All of these cars, V6 engines with turbochargers. There is the leader, number 8, Niki Lauda, the most experienced of Grand Prix drivers, 2 World Championship titles behind him, that dreadful accident which so nearly killed him in 1976 at the Nürburgring, and he's still racing. He's lapping, in fact, the Azella. The blue car is the Azella of the Italian Piercarlo Ghinzani, and Niki Lauda neatly laps him, and we look back now. In fact, we look at the gap, and it's 11.5 seconds between the two McLarens. Derek Warwick already 3.2 seconds back after 25 laps. Nigel Mansell still 4th, Patrick Tambay's Renault still 5th, and René Arnoux in the sole surviving Ferrari is 6th. Remember that Arnoux' teammate Michele Alboreto, who led the open, and going completely sideways, almost scattering the mechanics, and that will have thrown the very careful routine that the mechanics have. They have an arrow painted in the road which they like the car to park on exactly so that they can make their pit stop, their wheel change absolutely as quickly as possible with the power wrenches, but that will have delayed Tom engine, and he must be out of the race. Teo Fabi being lapped, and not being lapped by the leader Niki Lauda. Teo Fabi not making it particularly easy for Niki Lauda. And remember that Fabi is now on fresh tyres. He's getting the blue flag there from the corner marshals, which means there's a car behind you must overtake. Haino walks away from his car. That's his first Grand Prix over. But now Niki Lauda has lapped Teo Fabi. Fabi on fresh tyres, giving Lauda quite an anxious moment before the Austrian was able to scramble past the Brabham driver and go on his way. So Lauda completes his 29th lap, 32 laps to go, and we've got a pit stop for the third place man. Derek Warwick comes into the pits with Renault number 16, and he parks perfectly on the arrow in the road, the yellow arrow drawn in the road, the mechanics all round the car, and here comes Nigel Mansell. Mansell into the pits as well, so the third place man and the fourth place man simultaneously in the pits for their fresh tyres. And the front wheels are done, the back wheels aren't done. Nigel Mansell already engaging a gear and spinning the rear wheels before the car was off the jack. That nearly sent one of the mechanics flying, but Mansell now back in the race as we now have Riccardo Patrese making his pit stop with the Alfa Romeo number 22. So all the action now in the pits, and this is the moment when all the lap charters sharpen their pencils and knit their brows, because the race can become very, very confusing indeed. But still out in front, there is Niki Lauda with the McLaren very comfortably out on its own. He knows that he's got his own teammate, Alain Prost, in second place, and he shouldn't get too much of a challenge from him, so he can afford to drive a smooth, relaxed race, keep a watch on his gauges, make sure he laps the back markers without getting into trouble, and wait for his tyre stop, because we assume he'll make one. You'll remember that Nelson Piquet was telling us earlier he wasn't going to tell us whether he was going to make a pit stop or not. He's going to keep that all very canny. And in front of Nelson Piquet now, we've got Keke Rosberg, and Rosberg is 7th. That means Nelson Piquet is 8th. On our lap chart, there's less than 1 minute between Nelson Piquet in 8th place and the leader, Niki Lauda, and it's going to become 7th place because Piquet goes past Keke Rosberg. Number 1 passes number 6, and Nigel Mansell on fresh tyres after his pit stop is immediately behind Keke Rosberg. So Rosberg is passed by Piquet, and Mansell is going to pass him soon. There is Eddie Cheever, the American, in the pits. And we'll be right back after this short break with more ESPN Auto Racing 84 from the Brazilian Grand Prix. Just after half distance in the Brazilian Grand Prix, 31 laps gone, 30 in the heat here in Rio de Janeiro. That's one turbocharged engine that's cried enough. René Arnoux glancing in the mirror to get out, and that's Nelson Piquet in the pits. Piquet wasn't going to tell us whether he was going to make a tyre stop or not, but he has. This is the tyre stop. His teammate Theo Fabi has already been in. Nelson Piquet, who was delayed at the beginning of the race, but has driven a storming race up the field and is going to get into the points, I would think, pretty soon. Back out again goes Nelson Piquet, back into the race on fresh tyres, and now with only a half fuel load, and now we're really going to see the Brazilian start to charge on his home circuit. Piquet with his head tucked down into the cockpit, moving up through the gearbox, scrubbing in his new fresh tyres and settling down for a drive to the flag. On our lap charts, after that pit stop, he is now down in 9th place. Niki Lauda and Alain Prost, the leaders in the McLarens, they haven't made their pit stop. Derek Warwick in the Renault is in 3rd place, and he has had his pit stop. Elio De Angelis in the Lotus is 4th. He hasn't stopped yet. Nigel Mansell is 5th. He has stopped. Patrick Tambay is 6th. He has also stopped. And there you see the order after 31 laps, with Patrick Tambay 6th, Mansell 5th, De Angelis 4th, Warwick 3rd, and still those magnificent McLarens of Lauda and Prost at the top of the field. And that's one of the Brabham stopping. That's Theo Fabi in Brabham number 2, and his car's come to a complete halt, and we don't know what the problem is, but clearly Theo Fabi's race is over. He's out of the car. He's looking at the back of the car, and there is his teammate Nelson Piquet on his way. But whatever Theo Fabi's problem is, clearly his race is run. Nelson Piquet then charging on his way, and it's now that Piquet pulling off the track. That is Nelson Piquet parking. We've just seen his own teammate stop, and Piquet has stopped as well. He's sitting in the cockpit, looking down at the instruments. He's undoing his seat belts. He's getting out, I think. Yes, out comes Piquet. There's oil smoke billowing out of the back of the car. And so the man who won the race in 1982 and in 1983 is now out of the race. Nelson Piquet's retired. Now we see Niki Lauda, the leader, and behind him he's got Keke Rosberg, and Keke Rosberg, who is a lap down, is in fact fighting back and looks as though he could well unlap himself on the leader Niki Lauda. Now clearly Niki Lauda is driving to finish. He's not going to worry too much about Keke Rosberg, because he knows that Rosberg is a whole lap adrift, and he also knows, does Lauda, that it's his own teammate Alain Prost in 2nd place. And that's Elio De Angelis making his pit stop at last. They're showing him a sign which says brakes, which means keep your foot on the brakes while they change the tyres, so that in fact the rear tyre's already spinning. They've got a problem with the left-hand rear. They haven't got the left-hand rear on. The mechanic's still battling with that rear left-hand tyre. The wheel is not on, so a real delay. These tyre stops, when they're done quickly, can last about 9 or 10 seconds, but that must have cost another 15 or 20 seconds. But now De Angelis back in the race, and now Keke Rosberg is trying to unlap himself on the leader. Niki Marshals have pulled the restraining catch fencing away from the car, and we've got news of the leader. Niki Lauda, there he is slowing. Niki Lauda's in trouble. Elio De Angelis goes past him. His own teammate Alain Prost is closing on him. There is De Angelis. There is Prost, who's gone ahead, and Niki Lauda has slowed right down. Alain Prost has gone into the lead, and I think Prost is coming into the pits. There is Lauda going slower and slower on his way to the pits, and Alain Prost indeed does come into the pits. Prost's car still sounding healthy. He's coming in with the mechanics waiting. This is his routine tyre stop, and Alain Prost has briefly taken the lead, but as he's in the pits, Lauda comes in much more slowly behind him, and Lauda's engine sounding very silent indeed. Lauda out of the car. Niki Lauda, who led this race ever since Alboreto went off, is out of the car, doesn't even glance at his teammate Alain Prost, who rejoins the race. Prost rejoins the race, in fact, in second place, because Derek Warwick has gone through. Now, Warwick has had his pit stop. Prost has now had his, so they're back on equal footing. There is Alain Prost back in the race, but the new leader of the Brazilian Grand Prix now is Derek Warwick, the Englishman with the French Renault. This is lap 39, and there is the new second man. I say new second man, he was second before to Niki Lauda. He's now second to the new leader, Derek Warwick, with the Renault. So Prost is second, Tombe is third, Rosberg is fourth, and this is the battle for fifth place. Number 3 is the amazing young British driver, Martin Brundle, his first Grand Prix, a non-turbocharged car, and he's holding off Elio De Angelis. De Angelis has had a pit stop. De Angelis is on fresh tyres. Martin Brundle hasn't stopped yet, but Brundle holding on to fifth place ahead of Elio De Angelis. I think he's going to lose that fifth place any minute. He does. De Angelis goes through, but Brundle is still sixth with the Tyrrell, and that's a magnificent performance in his very first Grand Prix. And just out of the top 6 in a strong 7th place, the American driver Eddie Cheever. He's still looking good. We'll be back with more ESPN Auto Racing 84 and the conclusion of the Brazilian Grand Prix after this short message. We're into the closing stages of what has been a tremendously exciting opening to the 1984 Grand Prix season here in Brazil, as we see the race leader, Derek Warwick, lapping Martin Brundle, now in 6th place with the Tyrrell. Derek Warwick on his way with the Renault, now a clear half minute ahead of second man Alain Prost. And this is Riccardo Patrese in the Alfa Romeo number 22, and he's going a lot more slowly than he should. He's coming to a halt, in fact. He's pulling his car well over to the right of the road, trying to keep out of the traffic. There's third man Tombe in the other Renault, and into the pits comes Andrea de Cesaris with the Ligier, the sole surviving Ligier Renault, and he's coming in rather more slowly than a routine stop would indicate. I think he's got terminal troubles with that car. And meanwhile, we've got Martin Brundle coming in. Brundle coming in from 6th place, and this looks like a much more rapid stop indeed. This is going to be a tyre stop, I would think, for the Tyrrell team. The mechanics jump onto it. Now they're putting in water on the right-hand side of the car, as well as changing the tyres. That's to bring the ballast weight of the car up to the legal minimum. That's a new little tweak way of getting around the rules this year. The ingenious Formula One teams will always think of a new way, and they're adding water partway through the race to make sure that when the car is weighed at the end, it is up to the minimum weight limit. And it means, of course, that it can, without breaking the rules, do the early stages of the race slightly underweight. This is Keke Rosberg about to be lapped by race leader Derek Warwick as Elio De Angelis comes up behind them to lap Mark Surer in the Arrows. That's the Arrows having just been lapped by the Black Lotus, and ahead of them, Keke Rosberg just in front of Derek Warwick. They're both passing Jonathan Palmer in the Ram, another man, a newcomer to Grand Prix racing, having only his second Grand Prix here today. He's running a reliable, steady race at the back of the field, and now Derek Warwick lines up to lap Keke Rosberg in the Williams. Warwick with a comfortable lead. He's not going to force this. He's not going to chance anything by lapping Rosberg, who's a quick man. And Rosberg is wanting to go as quickly as he can because De Angelis is not very far behind him. Warwick pulls up alongside the Williams. Rosberg lets him go, but Rosberg doesn't want to waste any time because his fourth place is now being threatened by the Black Lotus behind him, who is fifth, and that's Elio De Angelis. The battle's going on all the way to the checkered flag in this wonderful race. Williams is slipstream now. Warwick is moving away. Warwick is clear of the Williams Honda, but the Williams Honda is being threatened. There's Warwick, there's Rosberg, there is De Angelis, and that's the battle behind Warwick for fourth place. Eddie Cheever now is sixth, with Martin Brundle in seventh place, still going well after his pit stop. And Alain Prost, of course, in a rather lonely second place in the McLaren, Patrick Tambay in an equally lonely third place in the Renault. So it's Renault first, McLaren second, Renault third, Williams fourth, Lotus Renault fifth, and Alfa Romeo sixth. That is an indication, if any indication were necessary, of what a competitive season this is proving to be, because several makes of car still running at the front of the race. Warwick taking a wide, clean line coming out of that Espn there, using all the road but no more, keeping clear of the curbs, making sure that he doesn't make any mistakes. Now he's all on his own. This is the time when a driver's heart is in his mouth. He's not under pressure. He's already starting to think of the checkered flag waiting for him, but it's now that he looks at the gauges, it's now that he listens to the engine note, it's now that he hopes that nothing is going to go wrong and cruelly steal the race from his pocket. Keke Rosberg has pulled away a little bit from Elio De Angelis. He's thrown off this challenge from the Lotus for his fourth place, and De Angelis has just slipped back a little bit. Keke Rosberg, driving like the ex-world champion he is, has managed to pull a little bit extra out of the bag, and he's shaken the Lotus off. So still the pressure really on, and it's now also that the drivers must be worrying about fuel consumption. Have they had their turbos turned up too high in the early stages of the race? Are they going to be running low on fuel? Will their 220 litres prove to be a little bit marginal at the end of the race? So crucial is the fuel capacity that several of the teams cooled their fuel to increase its specific gravity to get more fuel into the tanks. And De Angelis there still working hard in the cockpit of the Lotus Renault, but slipping back all the time from Keke Rosberg. Rosberg able perhaps just to relax a little bit more, not having to drive quite so defensively. There's a yellow flag there. That's Warwick! That's Warwick on the grass. The yellow car on the grass was Renault number 16, and Derek Warwick, the leader, is off the track. Derek Warwick has spun on that sharp wheel. I think something has broken at the front of the Renault. You can see Derek Warwick looking down at that wheel, and clearly all is not well with Renault number 16, and clearly everything's very well now with McLaren number 7. There is Alain Prost. He was in a steady second place, and suddenly he's found himself in these closing stages in the lead. Warwick in the pits, pointing to the front left-hand wheel. The Renault mechanics wave their arms with a finality of gesture, and that car number 16, the Renault of Derek Warwick, which has led for so long, is out. And here is McLaren number 7 of Alain Prost. And you'll remember we've said he's no lover of Renault these days, and he must have chuckled inwardly to see Derek Warwick's Renault parked by the side of the road. He's now 64 seconds in front of the other Renault of Patrick Tambay, and Patrick Tambay under a lot of pressure now from Keke Rosberg. Rosberg has thrown off De Angelis' challenge, and indeed is right up with Patrick Tambay and challenging him now for second place. Still the action and the drama goes on here in Brazil, because with Alain Prost leading very comfortably indeed for McLaren, second place is about to change because Keke Rosberg goes storming past the other Renault, Renault number 15 of Patrick Tambay. Derek Warwick out of the race, Patrick Tambay demoted down to third place. I would think all is not well with his car either, because Keke Rosberg made absolutely no bones at all about that and is up to second place. So Alain Prost starts his final 61st lap of this dramatic Brazilian Grand Prix with a comfortable lead with the McLaren tag. In second place now, Keke Rosberg with the Williams Honda, Tambay in a faltering third place, It's Elio De Angelis in 4th, Eddie Cheever in the Alfa is 5th, and Martin Brundle's back in the points with the Tyrrell. He is 6th. So, oh, and that's Tombe. That is Tombe coming to a complete halt on this final lap. It must have been fuel starvation that was delaying him, because I would wager that that Renault has run out of petrol. We knew that the fuel consumption would be marginal on a lot of these cars, and Patrick Tombe's car has come to a halt. Cruel, cruel luck on this final lap. As the checkered flag is there, Tombe walks disconsolately away from Alain Prost.
Just won the Brazilian Grand Prix in a textbook drive. Alain, you've just proven that you can win in the McLaren chassis. Did anyone challenge you throughout the race in the later stages?
I think I proved today that I was as competitive than last year with the Renault, and I think we proved today together with McLaren team and Michelin tire and the TAG Porsche engine that we are very, very competitive this year, and I hope to win Field Championship, because I lost for 2 points last year, and I do a very, very good beginning of season, and I hope to continue in the same step.
When you went by the Renault, did that add a little bit of thrill to your heart to realize that you were that competitive in another team and proving to everyone that you're a Grand Prix winner?
I think I need to prove that I can win every Grand Prix on each car. You know, that's the best thing for me. You know, I proved that I was able to win some races in the Renault team, and I'm able to win some races in the McLaren team. That's the most important for me. But now the second step is to win the championship. That it's my 10th victory today, but I never win a championship. It's not normal.
Your first 9 points very early in the championship helps that effort.
Yes, because we have a complete brand new car, a brand new engine, and I am completely new in the team, and my first win today is fantastic for me and for everybody.
When Niki Lauda went out so, not early in the race, but middle of the race, did that give you any worries about your mechanics?
Yes, because I did not know what happened in the engine of Niki's, but I know that it's nothing, it's only an electric problem, but I was a bit worried. But my engine was perfect, and my car too. I was just waiting in the middle of the race to change the tires, but problem today I did a very bad start, and I was obliged to go very quick at the beginning of the race to be not too far from Niki.
And no problems in the pit stop?
Yes, a little problem with the rear wheel. I think I spent too much time in the pit stop, but anyway, I won the race.
It must not have been too big of a problem.
No, it's not a big problem.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
This has been John Bizignano and Simon Taylor. We've enjoyed bringing you this ESPN coverage of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Thank you for joining us.